times more wives have a hard time with this, making the tie to the husband the strongest tie rather than any other family member. It says that Rebekah comforted Isaac. She recognized what his need was, and it said he loved her for that. When God made Eve, he said he wanted to make a help meet for Adam. When I was a child, I thought that was saying helpmate. I always, you just listened. I heard helpmate, not helpmeet. And when I was reading it once and realized it wasn't helpmate, it was helpmeet, I had to look that all up and figure out what it meant. Well, the word meet is defined in the dictionary as fit, suitable, proper, qualified, adapted to a use or purpose. Now that, with our feminist worldview of today in many places, would not be very popular. You're not supposed to adapt to a husband. But God said he wanted to make a wife who would be adapted to her husband, who would be adapted to his need. And Rebekah saw Isaac's need, and she met that need. Now, she had 20 years of waiting for a child. I know some of you would have been through that yourself or with family members. That is not easy to want a child so badly and have 20 years of waiting. It says then that Isaac prayed. Now, I don't believe that Isaac waited 20 years to pray. I think Isaac had been praying all along, but God has a timetable that's not like ours. And that trusting and continuing to pray through a time of waiting, that's the thing we must learn, to trust when we don't see God answering, and to believe that he is able. And so it says that Isaac pleaded with the Lord, and then she was pregnant. But the pregnancy was not easy. And I don't know if anybody's ever had twins. I did not, but they say it's very difficult when you have the two babies, and she said it felt like a war going on, kind of in our vernacular. And this is important because it brings Rebekah to personal prayer. Up to this time, it always just says Isaac prayed. It doesn't say whether she did or not. But now at this point, Rebekah prays to God himself for herself and her own needs. That's a huge step in Rebekah, learning to trust God, to entreat God. And I don't know how he answered her. I wish I knew. That's another thing we'll wait to heaven to find out. But it said that God told her, whatever that means, 2 nations are in thy womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So she has this promise from God. Now there's another incident, just like Abraham did, where Isaac lies about Rebekah being his sister and not his wife because he's afraid for his own life. So he protects himself instead of his wife, and God steps in and protects her. And so she sees that. She sees God stepping into her circumstances and protecting her. So how does she score as a wife? She's really up there, isn't she? And then we come to Rebekah the mother. The twins are born, and they said that Isaac came first, but Jacob was holding on to his foot. So they named Esau hairy because his body was already hairy, and they named Jacob, which his name means usurper or supplanter, like he was trying hard to get out first, you see. I won't go into those ideas, but now the boys are, I think, fraternal twins, not identical twins, because there's nothing alike about them. Their appearance, vastly different. They were different in appearance, personality, interest, activities. and the saddest verse in Rebekah's story. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, Isaac and Esau must have been a lot alike, because Isaac loved Esau because of the food he brought him, and Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for lentil stew. It says that Esau despised the birthright. Now I want you to understand the difference, because it's important here, the difference between the birthright and the blessing, okay? The birthright, in the MacArthur Study Bible, it's defined as the birthright conveys a double portion of the inheritance and the right to be the family chief and priest. So the person who gets the birthright, usually the oldest son, gets double the amount that the other members of the family would get, but he is also responsible then for the family. He's supposed to make sure that everybody's needs are met. Well, Esau evidently didn't want to do that. He didn't want to be the head of the family, and he didn't care that he would get a double portion because he didn't want the responsibility. And so one time he was very hungry, and Jacob was cooking stew, and he wanted some, and Jacob said, "Give me your birthright and I'll feed you," and Esau said, "Okay." So I think that Esau and Isaac thought too much of the food they were going to eat, don't you think? So the blessing, though, is the conveying of the promises to Abraham, the conveying of God's promise for the future sons, and the blessing on the family, and of course the Messiah. That was the blessing, the Abrahamic blessing from God being passed on to the next. Now I think you'll understand this better if we do a sidetrack up to Genesis 49 and talk about when Jacob's dying. Now Jacob has 12 sons, right? And he gives, in in 49 of Genesis, he speaks to each son. Sometimes 2 sentences, sometimes a long paragraph. So I'm not going to read them all. But he gives Judah the blessing. You know, the verse, "The scepter shall not fail." He's going to have Messiah. Your brothers will serve you. He gives him the blessing. But he gives Joseph the birthright. So Joseph gets the double portion. Now, how did that work out? Well, Judah, the tribe of Judah, of course, dwelt in Jerusalem, around Jerusalem, and they became the kings of Judah, and Jesus is born from the tribe of Judah. But now when Joshua finished conquering the land, and they were dividing up the land and saying this tribe here, they divided it into 12 parts. Not equal, because all the tribes weren't the same size. So 12 sons, 12 parts, right? No, Levi didn't get a part, because the Levites had to live everywhere. They wanted a Levite close to everybody. So the Levites were in every town. So that leaves 11. So what's that mean? Joseph got 2. Ephraim and Manasseh each got a portion, because Joseph had the birthright. So his had 2 sons, and so Joseph got the double portion of the blessing. Do you see? You understand the difference between blessing and birthright? So, Rebekah was standing at the door, and she heard Isaac tell Esau to go get some meat and fix it like he liked it best, and he would give him the blessing. Now, I don't know what would have happened if Rebekah had prayed and said, "God, you know this isn't the way it's supposed to be, so please take care of it." Something would have happened, but that's not what Rebekah did. The favoritism for Jacob brought Rebekah to sinful acts. God had said Jacob would be the heir, but she would not leave it up to God to ensure it would happen. In one of the books I have on the women in the Bible by Spangler and Swear, it says, Rebekah's heart would divide itself between faith and desire, believing that God's promise required her intervention. Finding it difficult to rest in the promise God had made, she resorted to trickery to achieve it. Now here you have Jacob. He's a grown man. He's not a teenager. He's not a little boy. He's a grown man, and she tells him what to do. And he raises some objections, but if you look at it, he's afraid of being caught. He's not objecting to deceiving his father. He's saying, well, he'll find out. He'll figure this out. Well, she persuades him to do it anyway. Then you have Rebekah, and you might think, if God spoke to me and told me something, I wouldn't have acted this way. But you have to think, in our day, in our lives, God has spoken. In the Sarah lesson, do you remember it said that there were 8,000 promises? Do you remember that line in her book? I've never counted them. I have this little book called God's Promises. I have it in your bibliography if you'd be interested in having it. It's a wonderful little book, all in categories of promises. And it's all just scripture, categorized by promises. But here's a verse in Isaiah 46. My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. I have spoken it. I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it. I will also do it. Do you think if Rebekah had had that in her hand, it might have made a difference? But you see, we do have it in our hand. We have the 8,000 promises God has given, but we need to know them and then appropriate them into our lives. Now, Isaac has doubts in this process. He says, it feels like Esau. I smell the meat. It smells like Esau. And this person smells like Esau, but the voice is Jacob. But what does he do? He wants to eat. So he blesses him anyway. And then when Esau comes and begs for him to give him the blessing, he says, I have blessed Jacob, and indeed he shall be blessed. I think Isaac knew Jacob was the one who was supposed to be blessed. Can't prove that, but I think so. What are the results? Well, they were disastrous. Esau said, I'm going to kill Jacob as soon as my father dies. Now, they thought Esau was dying here, but he actually lived a long, long time after this, almost 40 more years. So Rebekah pleads with Isaac to send Jacob to her family for a bride. She doesn't tell him that Esau's going to kill him if they don't send him away. She says he needs to find a wife in my family because these Canaanite wives of Esau are driving me crazy. And so she again is being deceptive in not telling him the true reason. She sent Jacob away thinking things would get better soon and she could send for him, but she never saw him again. The long-lasting results are still with us today. Jacob and his descendants would forever be at odds with Esau and his people, the Edomites. Herod the Great was an Edomite, the man who killed all those babies, little children in Bethlehem trying to kill Jesus. It's instructive. I did this. If you've got a Bible concordance, just look up Edom and Edomites and look down through the Old Testament how many wars there are. It's just interesting to see how much there is. So, lessons from Rebekah's failure. We should never try to manipulate events rather than trust God to shape our future according to his timetable. Again, in the Spangler book. The line that kept coming to my mind as I studied this is in one of my very favorite hymns, Be Still My Soul, that says, leave to thy God to order and provide, both to order and to provide. In every change he faithful will remain. Now, God does want us to pray and trust in faith believing. At times there are actions we need to take as well as pray. We studied that a lot in James, remember? If you pray for a person who needs food and you have food, you're supposed to give it to them. If you pray for them to be warm and you have means for that. There are a lot of times when we're supposed to do things as well as pray. But Dr. Bob Sr., our dear founder of our university, had a way of putting things in a pithy, memorable way. And he said, it's never right, can you say it, some of you, to do wrong, even to get a chance to do right. Those who went to the university or have any contact with the university know that saying because we heard it a lot. But it's so true. Never do wrong, even to do right. I thought it would be important, if you have the workbook to fill out, it said to list things about not showing favoritism, which is the core of this issue, that they were showing favoritism. And so I did some reading on several Christian parenting blogs, and I have them listed, but I don't try to credit everybody because it was kind of all there in my mind. But where I got this material is given to you. First thing is, showing favoritism is condemned in Scripture. First of all, it means you're not loving right. If we love our neighbors as ourselves, we'll do well. But it says if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. And then it's wrong because it's ungodly. That is, it is unlike God. God does not show favoritism. There's two verses there, an Old Testament verse and a New Testament verse. No partiality with God. God does not judge us on any basis. He loves us and gives us his mercy. Partiality is defined as favoring someone strictly on a superficial external basis, such as appearance, race, wealth, rank, or social status. Now, James chapter 2 talks about showing partiality in the church, and Rebekah's example gives us the dire consequences of showing favoritism within the family. Now, why do people favor one child over another? The basis might be gender, abilities, personality, activities, or birth order. Birth order because a first child, you have that child alone, and the last child you have kind of alone. The poor middle children never have the undivided attention of a mother. Some of you are middle children, aren't you? I'm the baby of the family. But anyway, that can be an issue if you've just had more individual time with one child than another child because of your life circumstances. But more likely, it's behavior, attitudes, compliance, demeanor. Now, there are times when one child, because of this life circumstances, needs more attention. And giving that attention to that child is not showing favoritism. It's meeting that child's need at that time. But if there's a pattern in a family that one child gets a lot more time, a lot more attention than the other children or than one other child, then that should be a red flag to a parent that you're showing favoritism to a child. Recognizing and avoiding it in families. First of all, we have to think of our relationship to God. God loves us even though we don't deserve to be loved. It's all of his grace and not based on our behavior. Our children and grandchildren should know that we love them unconditionally the way God does. And our love is not conditioned on performance or behavior. Both our words and our actions must convey love and grace to every child. So be proactive, demonstrating and speaking love, not just when there's a specific behavior. Every child should have time and attention, both private time and family time. One sentence that stuck out to me said, "Love is not finite. You can love one child with all your heart and love another child with all your heart." This last thing I have in that, really spoke to me a lot. I have 4 grandchildren, 17 to 20, and they're as different as night and day, 4 differences. And this says, we understand a child who is more like ourselves better than one who's quite different. We tend to be more patient with that child, more understanding. We see good in that child and less good in another child. And this can lead to favoritism. We may be too quick to punish one child, too quick to excuse another. We listen to whims and desires of one child and ignore. And I've done a lot of soul searching about this because I have some children that it's easier. And it's because they're like me. You know, I've really spent some time with this and asking the Lord to help me with some things because this part has really spoken to me about this. Sometimes when they're very different from our point of view, they like very different things than we do. It's easy to not be as understanding, and it will show. They perceive a lot, kids do. So, Ed Walsh, one of the ones I read, said, parents who show partiality to one child are often blind to the good in another child. But the real danger is that when parents treat children unfairly, it may not only drive the unfairly treated child away from home, but away from God. Negative effects. I'm just going to read what I have in, because we're running out of time, but said that the favored child may have excessive pressure to succeed, which leads to stress. They'll feel the resentments of their siblings. The less favored children may develop behavioral problems to get attention, even risky behavior to get attention. There'll be sibling rivalry. They will fail to develop a healthy self-worth and belief in their own abilities, and they might become depressed because they feel like they don't measure up. You miss the great